on the treatment table. I'm Stephanie, your host for today's discussion with Amy Lafko, the founder of Karen Consulting Solutions and author and keynote speaker around the idea of people first. Her book title sets the tone for today's conversation, People First, a proven method for an exceptional healthcare practice. Amy, thank you for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your expertise in this area?
Hi, thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me join you. So what contributes to my expertise is the fact that I've failed as a leader, and I always like to be really honest and transparent about that. I'm not an expert in the way some people claim to be. It's simply that I've learned lessons the hard way, and my goal is to have other people not have to go through some of the stuff I went through. And I always love to point out that I am a physical therapist. So if anybody out there went to Ithaca College, woohoo. I just did a session for the Oregon chapter of the APTA a while back, and it turned out one of my professors moved out there. So I had this mini meltdown when I realized he was on the call. But anyway, I'm so glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing insights and expertise from all of you as well, because we're all experts at something in parts of our work.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate your vulnerability right off the bat because this is definitely not the
Mhm.
easiest topic to share personal stories about. I'm happy to see some repeat offenders here. Hi, Nisha. Hi, Dawn and Jill, Martina, and Andrew. Um, oh, and Michelle's here too. Hi. So quick reminder for everyone else who may be joining us for the first time. This is meant to be an interactive session, so please turn your cameras on. Feel free to jump in and participate throughout. We don't want this to feel like a webinar where you're passively listening. If you're eating lunch or driving, totally fine to keep your cameras off for a little bit, but hopefully you get a chance to at least ask a question in the chat or come off mute. When you have a question, you can either just physically raise your hand and I will call you up, or you can drop it in the chat, whatever is easiest. So let's dive right in and start with meeting cadence. So my first question of the day is going to be, how often do you meet with each team member? And again, you can either answer in the chat, or if anyone wants to say their meeting cadence out loud, feel free to just unmute and share it.
Hey, Stephanie, just a heads up, you threw that question in the chat just to me and not to everyone.
Thank you, thank you. There we go. So
Martina's already got her hand up. Yay.
I'll say I probably do weekly. I really try to keep my one-on-one with my secretaries and my administrative assistants as tight as I can, just to try to be there to facilitate anything that they might have that they have to help with me, or just to give them my moral support. So I try to do that.
Martina, can I just ask, that sounds like a tactical practical weekly meeting. Is that where we talk about, like, if they're stuck on something or anything that they, it's where you kind of go over what's happening in the week, or is that about their goals, their progress, those types of things?
No, it would be more tactical,
Okay.
and more social.
Yeah.
For the other part, no, I failed to communicate effectively with some of this other stuff.
We've all got natural strengths and talents, right? But that's great. And I like to clarify that because, I've had some people who, when we talk about this, will say, well, I meet with everybody, well, I see them in the gym across the way, so I don't need to sit down with them because I see them every day, all day long. And I'm like, really? So you're standing over a patient going, how are you progressing towards your long-term goals? So that's the reason we always want to ask that specificity around what is the focus. Because Martina, you're right. Like, I meet with my admin. My gosh, we meet twice a week right now because we're doing some onboarding, and we're doing some new processes. So that tactical type of meeting needs to happen as often as it does to help the work get done. But I noticed a couple other people, like Brittany, you put in the chat every other week, once a month, depending on role. Well, tell me about that type of meeting, Brittany. I don't know where Brittany went.
Hi, I'm here. I'm eating lunch.
Hi, Brittany. I just don't even see a box with nothing. So, hello.
Hi. It depends. So we meet with our so I'm here and my clinical director Dan is here. We meet every week or every other week, and then we meet every other week with admin for like a let's make sure we're all on the same page for billing things that are outstanding or any issues with the clinic as a whole. And then we meet about once a month with each physical therapist to just as like a check-in. We meet more than that as just like in our lunchroom or, by chatting, but like a true scheduled meeting is about once a month with our clinical team.
Okay. I love that. Thank you. And then we've got a couple people that are quarterly. So, Nisha, Caitlin, you're quarterly. I'd love to hear what the focus of that quarterly is.
Caitlin, you can take that. She works with me.
Yeah, so we're kind of in the process of structuring that a little differently. Trying to get some more, traditionally it has been more like our individual check-in. So like, how are you doing? What are you doing well? Where do we need to see improvements? What are your goals for the coming quarter? How did the last quarter go? That sort of conversation. And we still want it to be that way, but also having a more formal like annual review kind of thing. But outside of that, that is most of like the individual team members, but we have some other structured meetings with some of our various positions in the company as well, like front office staff and that sort of thing, a little more frequently to make sure we're all on the same page with things and processes and that sort of thing as well.
I love it. Okay, that's great. You know what? Caitlin, I'm going to share with you guys. Stephanie, am I allowed to do this? Like once we get everybody else chatting a little bit, I have some tools that you can steal and I'll send them to anybody that needs them. But that kind of gives a structure around it. And if your quarterly is done well, it actually just turns into your annual review. You don't need any different form of document. So if you're in, I can show that in a little bit, but I'd love to hear what some other people have because this is really, what are you guys doing that's working?
Yeah. Did anyone skip over answering in the chat because they don't have meetings right now?
Mhm.
Okay. Michelle Solo.
Mhm. And for any of the other folks who are meeting at a regular cadence, we do it once every 6 months and then as needed. I saw somebody, yeah, Jillian was one time per month. Andrew, you're weekly. Do you guys have a format that you'd be willing to share with the rest of the group or what method you use?
I know Andrew's comfortable sharing, right? Nudge,
Andrew,
nudge.
just take yourself off mute. Have at it.
Okay, well, so I'm a really small practice. There's really myself and then another physical therapist. I hate to refer to as a staff PT, even though we're technically not partners. She doesn't have ownership. We're still very collaborative, and I just have a lot of confidence in her, not only her clinical abilities, but just her ability to counsel together with me, I guess is the best way to put it. So we discuss things a lot. The weekly thing is a little bit more formal, but really, truly, we probably meet almost daily or every other day. There's issues that come up, and we share office space, and perhaps it affects our efficiency a little bit, but we're both pretty good about like, okay, now I need to buckle down here and do some paperwork or whatever. But often when we're in there at the same time, we'll just mention something to the other person and it becomes a discussion point. And then those are things that we'll bring up later in our executive team meeting. She and our billing and front office person, we all meet together at least once a month. So when I say weekly, that's usually when we just sit down and say, look, Here's some of the things that happened last week that really we could change. And, kind of like it's pretty informal. It's more like this was the good stuff, this was the bad stuff. How do we keep doing the good stuff and how do we change the bad stuff? So we don't have a really formal agenda. It's pretty informal, but just very collaborative.
Andrew, it's actually great to hear you say that, as a small practice, because I've often had some smaller practices push back and say, "Oh, we don't need to be formal." And my team today, I only have 3 team members. So I fell into that camp. I'm like, "Oh, we're kind of on track with stuff." But my new executive assistant, we just went through her keys to managing. So I had her do an assessment, looks at her behavioral styles, her motivations, and it has a page on keys to managing. And I was thrilled when one of the ones she came up with, and I made my notes just yesterday and they never left my desk, so it's perfect. But she said performance appraisals regularly. And I said, "Well, what does that mean to you?" And so she talked about what she considered a performance appraisal. She said it's not the sit down where you just say, "Okay, here's what here's how we can change this process," or "You need to add this to an email," or what have you. She's like, "I really want to know how I'm doing overall." And I said, "Well, you're in luck because we do quarterlies, and even just, with 3 team members or however many there are, believe it or not, someone said they're a solo provider. Michelle, is it Michelle? Um, Michelle, you got to do these with yourself. Okay. I'm not kidding. And you need to do your annual strategic planning with yourself. Now, I don't like being by myself, so I always did mine with someone else. We would actually get together. One time we did it at the Minneapolis Mall of America Marriott. And we drew on flip charts for 2 days. We each did our own strategic plan and then presented them to each other. So you still want to be doing these things. It just might look a little bit different. But I'm going to share screen for a second and just hopefully, and again, I can send this to anybody that wants it, or I don't know, Stephanie, we can figure out how we want to send it out. But one of the benefits of actually tracking what you talk about in your quarterlies is no matter how many people you have, you can have different memories, right? Different recollection of stuff. So this is the quarterly tool that I use with everybody. So it's like the quarterly for what person. And the first one of these happens at the 90 days after the end of their 90 days. Then at the 90-day, we've actually established what their 3 individual goals are for the year. So we write those out here. And then we have that first quarterly sit down, that second, that third, whatever. And it starts with what's going well from their point of view. This is me asking them answering. I always like to know who should be recognized and for what, because no matter how big or small your team is, I want to hear who is doing things to be helpful. And then you start to create that idea of we are a grateful organization that recognizes other members and how we support each other. So then you're going to talk about each quarter, how's it going towards your goals? And sometimes this might be, "Oh, I didn't start that goal yet. It's to get my OCS, but I can't even get into the class until this date." Okay, fine. Then we just put, TBD. Or it could be, "Well, it's going well, but somehow it's gotten stalled." Or here's what's working, here's what's not. And then we make any notes about adjustments they're going to make towards this. The second page is really where I've got their key accountabilities. Now, this is a method I use. It's in my book. I have some materials if people want to know about this, but ditching your job descriptions and really focusing on what are the key expectations around financial, patient, team, whatever those buckets are. And then underneath that, you've got these really specific action verbs instead of really generic job descriptions. I mean, I've done key accountabilities for a whole bunch of practices, and every single one of them, the front desk person's looks different. You may think front desk, front desk, front desk, but it turns out no. So same for therapists. But so we put those categories here, and every quarter when we sit down, we pull out the key accountabilities. We talk about where there's alignment, where there's challenges, and then what we're going to do to get back on track if there's something amiss. And then I always love to ask, what else do you need from me? This is from my days in home care. You never left a patient's house without saying, what else do you need from me? And it could be, can you go get my mail? Can you do this? Whatever it was. So what do you need from me? And then I always like to leave space for other, because maybe they're going to tell us, they've planned their perfect vacation. I don't know, whatever it is, something I want to remember. And then you do this throughout the year. And now look what happens. Meeting 4, ta-da, is this form, but it's called your annual performance review instead. And based on the success and the key, based on goal achievement, based on key accountability, accuracy, like 100% on target, 80% on target. Now, if I'm going to do a merit raise, that can go right in here. So the only reason there's only 3 quarters on here is because for the 4th quarter, I like a little more space. Thoughts on that? Caitlin, what are you thinking? Because you were the one that brought this up and like trying to get more formal.
Yeah, I love this idea. This is actually very similar to the like we were going for more structure like this. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
What did I miss? What do other people have in theirs that we didn't talk about?
I'll share. Ours looks very similar, except we do it in a Google Doc. So,
Yep.
we have that whole history right above the last meeting. And we call our opener help and highlights, but it's still, tell me what you need support on and then who should be recognized. Very, very similar themes.
I love help and highlights. What a fun wordplay.
Anyone else want to share? You have similar structure? Are you just throwing it in a notebook? That's my favorite when I go into a one-on-one and the other person has their notebook and I have everything typed up in our shared doc. And I'm like, oh, are you going to hand that to me across the screen?
Is she trying to imply that I'm old because I write? I'm feeling it,
I just like the records to live in a shared doc, right? If
I'm
you
with
write it in your
you.
notebook, then how am I supposed to review it later?
Absolutely. I'm with you. I actually used to do mine. So that's a shared PDF document that we can both put info in.
Fair.
But even back in the day, because I do love to write, but my team's remote now, so it's not even possible. But I still do keep written notes, and then it's easier for me to write. So then I upload them. But yes, I know exactly what you mean. And it is great that we can share them across the way.
So I'm going to get into a little bit more tactical. How do we do this as the owner with each person on our team? Is there a certain size where now we delegate this to someone else to be handling? What does that look like?
I'm curious. So, Caitlin, with the system you guys are putting into place, what's that going to look like?
So currently the way our roles are set up is Nisha is our clinic owner, and then myself and we have another therapist here. Her name is Michaela, and one more at another clinic location. Michaela and Hillary are team leads. And so right now, Michaela, myself, and Hillary are conducting those quarterlies. But with the idea of adding in an annual review, we thought about bringing in Laura and Nisha into the annual review piece of it, just for another touch point with them throughout the year. That's a little more personal, where they can kind of catch up on all the goals we've been working on with each of the individual team members.
One thought, does anybody else do where maybe as the owner, you're not necessarily in on the quarterlies, but then you jump in on the annual? Anybody else doing that right now?
No, I'm not doing that exactly, but I have a future owner that we've been grooming for about 7 years, and so he's taken on the part-time roles, the techs. He does all of their, and we kind of have a fleet of those. So he does a lot of those quarterly, and then I don't even do the interviews on those anymore. It's been wonderful. He's going to launch his own clinic here in a few months, and I'll be pulled back into the fray.
That's great, though. One thing to think about for your team members, especially what you have to think about how often they're having interaction with that owner, especially if they're a separate clinic or something like that. You may actually want to set it up a little bit differently where the performance review isn't the connection point with the owner, but that maybe the goal setting is the connection point with the owner, where that might be a way, because, whether we intend to or not, we're the big boss. It can get overwhelming for some folks, and a little bit scary. And so there's two benefits of kind of separating that out. The one is if that staff member is having challenges, having their direct supporting leader instead of the two up or the owner coming in for that meeting can be, it can de-escalate any tension before it starts. And the other thing is, the role of the owner when you've got a hierarchy is not to be the one that's doing the direct development per se with that frontline staff member. And so we want those communication categories always clear and structure always clear. But what you can do, like for example, at one point I was, working in acute care and I had 3 managers and then we had like 30 staff. But what I would do is make sure that when we had a new hire at the 1 month mark, I took them out to lunch. And the lunch was not me, the big boss, coming in to say, here's some other things you need to know. It was literally just me going, hey, what questions do you have? And sometimes people spent all of lunch telling me about their vacation plans or whatever. Sometimes they talked about all the issues they were having. I mean, I didn't care, but it was a connection point. And then another place that you can make connection is from that goal setting standpoint of as the owner leader, I'm here to support you with your growth and I'm here to support your leader in helping you grow. But maybe take away that potential tension point around the big boss just showed up for my annual, oopsie, am I getting in trouble? Just a thought, my thought only.
I like that a lot.
I appreciate that as well, because that's sometimes my struggle is, we're a staff of, I think we're up to 29 at this point, and so that's essentially why it had to be delegated to my admin team and my 3 clinical directors. But I do sometimes worry about getting too pulled away where I don't have those checkpoints, or it feels like they can't come talk to me, or I'm don't want to bother me sort of thing. But I still want to kind of have the open door and have the availability for people to come talk and have the touch points, but not kill myself in trying to manage 30 one-on-one.
Absolutely. And, I think there's so many ways that you can actually manage those touch points in really value add ways for the staff. But one of the most important is, and again, this is only my view, I'd love for other people to jump in, but one of the places I got in trouble was I kept trying to go right to the front line. I wanted to have an open door. I wanted to be supportive, but guess what? I'm not their one-up. And so it was really interesting. My VP at the time had this awesome document about like what the role of the 1-up was versus the 2-up or the 3-up. And she had very distinct lanes of what she did. I met with her. She was my 2-up. I met with her. So I was a director, I had a senior director, and then she was my VP. I don't know why I'm doing it sideways, but she was my VP. So 2-up from me. She and I met every single month. But what we talked about, her opening question was, what did you do this month that was resumeable? What do you see for the big picture for yourself and it was very different than here's your performance. It was almost serving as a mentor, but she then did not go further down. That was the role of the 2-up. So for me, in my role with the managers in between was just to meet with people and say, what support do you need? Where are you going? What's your big picture? That's a really valuable way to move into that true ability to let go. Because Nisha, your job now is to be the most amazing support for the leaders you directly support so that they can pour that into the staff. Because you're in the middle of stage 3 in terms of how big you are for growth. You're between 20 and 34. And in that phase, that's when you're adding managers for the first time. That's when you shift to really people do become the priority. And this is where you got to watch staff buy-in. But if you're the one telling them about staff buy-in or trying to get staff buy-in on projects and plans, it's not going to be as successful as if you're frontline leaders are actually able to do that. Because the biggest challenge you might have at this stage is the leadership staff gap. You can't fill it. You have to pour it into your leaders so they can fill it. I just got very directive. Oh my God, I was even pointing fingers. Whoo! Who else has an idea? Tell me how you're approaching it and maybe doing it differently.
Amy, I was actually thinking this is a great time to talk about what percent of time you're in the clinician mindset versus the leader mindset, because I think we have clinic directors and owners on this call, and the clinic directors may be more used to being in that clinician mindset most of the time. And I at least know personally, having my team on the call, I'm looking over at like that last year transition of moving from treating to leadership.
Oh, I'm curious. I always love to hear how often are you in the mindset of clinician versus leader, or leader versus practice owner? Take yourself off mute. Just jump right in.
As someone who just recently kind of transitioned into one of these roles, that has been something I've been kind of juggling back and forth of time management with those sorts of things too. And so right now we have about 2 hours worth of administrative time specifically blocked to be alone and working on things, but there is other sprinkled in time throughout the week, so upwards to 4 hours a week devoted to kind of that leadership role. But then outside of that is more clinician time. But I find myself at times still trying to be leader while I'm being clinician at the same time too. So yeah.
Caitlin, I've heard that one of my clients said, she's like, when I'm doing patient care, I'm thinking about training or things we could be developing based on what I'm seeing in the clinic. And she said, so for me, that's when I was like, I need to really step back from patient care because I'm not giving my 100% view to the patient anymore. And sometimes it's the opposite, where when you're in leadership mindset, you're still looking at things from, well, the patient comes first, and how challenging that can be. So it is a tough blend.
Nassim, you can hop off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was going to say something before, but I know the conversation has shifted something different. So I'm a little too light here, but I wanted to share. So I don't, and I think it's a really good presentation, and I love the template that you have. I would love to use those. I have not done formal meetings with my staff, and because a lot of my staff is my friends, and it's like we meet, but we talk about other things, kids and outside work, and not. So I would love to get it more formalized. But one activity that we did last 6 months ago was I had these little white papers on the wall, like we had like 4 or 5 of them. And then I gave each of the therapists like a sticky notepad of different colors. And we had like something about financial, we had patient, we had education, we had just fun activities, and then clinic culture. And everybody had to write down like what they thought could be, or they could have been built on to somebody else's sticky note. And at the end of it, we just had such a great energy and a lot of different ideas about what we could do. We haven't implemented all of those. Like on that day, we felt everything can be implemented in 2 months, but it's been already 6 months and we have hardly gone 50%. But I just thought it was a great way to connect with all the staff and like them building on each other's ideas.
How awesome. Who else uses sticky notes? Oh my gosh, they're phenomenal. William, I see you nodding. They're amazing. And the nice thing is, you can theme out your, Nassim, I'm sure you found themes with the sticky notes. So you can put those all together and then suddenly people don't feel so alone. It's amazing. Even if you have people who are quiet during staff meetings, once they've written it down, somehow that gives them permission to speak about it. So that is such a great technique. Thank you so much for sharing that. Sticky notes are awesome.
moving into the leadership side of things. So when we're talking about how much time is spent in the clinician mindset versus the leader mindset, how are we planning our continuing education around leadership when the impulse might be to take this new class and get this extra certification? Yes, Nisha, coming to conference. I brought my team to conference 2 years in a row, and I think they had a great time. And it was great for me because they got to go to totally different sessions than I did, and then we got to debrief afterwards.
Conference is amazing.
Are there any leadership skills that you think we should be focusing on, Amy?
Well, I don't know. Jillian or the other person not labeled in her room just like totally popped up. So I feel like there's something they want to share, and I'm
That's
so
my
super
team.
curious.
So that's
Oh my
my-
gosh. I
yeah.
was like, wow, they're like,
That's fine.
there's something happening right there. I was so excited. I'm like, what do they got going on?
You could share, Dawn.
26, that's what I popped up for.
What'd you say?
Oh, that she
I wanna
wants to
go to the
come to Denver
conference.
this year.
Oh my
I
gosh,
had a
who doesn't-
blast. I had a blast at 2025, so.
Who doesn't want to go to the Broadmoor? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Stephanie, am I allowed to shamelessly plug that I'm doing a session about conflict, which is my favorite topic?
Oh,
Am I allowed to
definitely.
shamelessly plug that?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I just did.
So can you guide us on some of the core leadership skills that we should be assessing in ourselves and looking to develop?
Mm.
Do you have examples?
Well, all kidding aside, conflict resolution has got to be something you're comfortable, confident, and skilled at. I think, I just actually worked with a practice, and we did it for the entire practice. So we had like 23 people where we did a conflict workshop for that practice. And I've worked with other practice leaders where they then go like roll out the model. But the more skilled people are at having conflict, the easier everything gets. And it was fascinating because like one of the texts, we said, well, how would resolving conflict make your life better? And this was an answer I never thought I'd hear. He said, I could make plans with my girlfriend on the weekend. And I thought, I don't really understand. Tell me more. And he goes, I haven't been able to get a clear schedule yet, so I can't make plans with my girlfriend on the weekends. And I said, did you ask? And he goes, no, I don't want to cause problems. So for him, it was not even learning to have conflict. It was actually learning that conflict isn't a conversation. I said, you can ask that. And it was so funny because the owner was there and he goes, oh my God, we haven't gotten you a real schedule yet. He's like, well, no, but I didn't want to bring it up. I don't want to cause problems. So in their clinic, and when we think about most frontline staff, 70% of them are high steadiness folks. So they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause conflict. They don't want to say no. And so they're just going to keep it all in. But man, if we can get good at conflict, and as leaders, if we can get really clear is kind, so if we can get to that place, it can be amazing. And so I think that's one of the most valuable skills we can have as leaders. And it's not just, can I do it, but am I confident in it? Whenever I ask people about their skills, even during interview process, I don't ask about a skill in terms of capability. I look at confidence with it as well. I think about back when I was doing Trigger Point, I was capable of doing Trigger Point. Was I confident in using it? No. So I'd wait till my patient was face down and then I'd whip out my manual because I was like always wanting to do it right. And so there's a difference between capable and confident in doing something. But I think conflict resolution is primary. Listening skills are vital for us as leaders. And a lot of people think they listen really well. But we don't hear and we listen, as Stephen Covey taught us, greatest book ever, 7 Habits Highly Effective People. We got to listen to understand. And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons for leaders to have, but it's actually not easy for us. You know, a lot of leaders, we got here because we're good at what we do. We know the direction we want. You're a practice owner, you've got your directionality. And so being able to go quiet can be hard for us. I think that's a really, really valuable skill for all of us to have. What do you guys think are the most important ones?
I was going to ask you for one more, and then maybe we'll see who is feeling confident in some of these skills and who would like resources to expand.
I think another skill that all leaders need to have is the ability to articulate the vision. Be really clear about the why and connecting the why for your people. So interestingly, my last job as a healthcare leader was urgent care. They asked me to leave. Okay, so I went from like my most comfortable home to home care to urgent care, which I'd never even been in urgent care. And what became most valuable was the fact that the whole staff hated working there. You know, they hated it. And it was like, well, why does urgent care matter? And we had to connect them to the why. And the thing is, in rehab, and I was guilty of this too, we think we know everybody's why. And it's not all the same. So we gotta really connect it for them. Purpose matters. So I think that's another one. And then another thing that I think is hugely valuable is being really good at setting and communicating expectations. And because if we're going to truly hold people accountable, we need to be able to set clear expectations, communicate those expectations, listen for feedback around them, and then resolve any conflicts or challenges that come up because of it.
Okay. So we have conflict resolution, listening skills,
Yeah.
connecting to purpose,
Mhm.
setting and communicating expectations.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And here's another one. Emotional intelligence. We all got to know how to squash our ants. So our automatic negative thoughts, these little ants that are running around all of our heads. I just actually got off a workshop where we were talking about assumptions. We all have them. It's our lizard brain, our amygdala kicks in. And so no matter what your style is as a leader, the more self-awareness you have about your own emotions and your ability to regulate them, the more strong your ability to squash your ants, those automatic negative thoughts, the better. And then you can get into, can I read the room and read the emotions of others? But I think EQ is just vital. Oh my gosh.
So out of those 5, which ones do you feel really confident in, Martina? What do you feel good about? I can do that because I know Martina by now.
I think my 2 are probably listening and connecting the why. I'm always sharing that. I don't think I run from conflict because in my previous lifetime, that's all I dealt with. And it caused so much stress in my life. So I don't seek conflict. I don't even try to, I squash it by probably avoiding it and hoping that it's not there. And I have a blind eye to it now. And I have a smaller team. I only have 4 people in my clinic, 2 clinicians and 2 non-clinic for support personnel. And we really, really communicate well. We share everything. We work really well together. So I'm trying to do it a different way than I've ever done it before, where I listen. It's not, I'm the clinician and people come here, but we are a team and every one of us has something that we're really, really good at. And like I have a PTA that decorates my windows and it's all artistic and she does such a great job. And I really, really like that. And it just brings out, so I really bring out the best of everybody, or I'm trying to bring out the best of everybody so that it's not just about being a clinician and treating, it's more of all this other stuff that I'm hoping is doing something because we're doing well in Clarion and I'm happy and everybody's happy. So as long as we can stay happy, it's all good. So we're trying it that way. So, but I'd have to say the conflict resolution, it scares the hell out of me anymore. And I'm older and I just started this clinic now for 2 years, 3 years, and I just want to have fun. and I want it to be having fun, and that's what it's supposed to be. So I have a really, really good attitude about that, and I think it shares with my staff. So
Martina, I love hearing that. And, I think the only reason, well, one of the reasons I talk about conflict is because when we just keep pressing stuff down, it doesn't go away. And so the sooner we can bring it up and resolve it, and we can do that in a way that protects and supports our team. And that's why I think conflict resolution skills are so vital because, I'll never forget the time someone came up to me in a hallway and said, "We're about to have a crucial conversation." And so clearly they'd read the book, Crucial Conversations, but like in a hallway, finger in my face,
right.
that was not going to ever work out well, no matter what it was about. And so it's how do we make conflict comfortable?
Mhm.
How do we make conflict just part of growth and development as opposed to, I mean, I think about kids who, when they're growing, some people have those growth spurts and they're painful. But other people, it's like, oh, you've gotten taller, but you don't have that level of pain. But we want to find ways, and there are ways to make conflict less scary and less of a beast. So that would be my invitation to you is just looking at it doesn't have to be conflict with a capital C and like be the way we make it in our head.
Good.
Hi, I work with Nisha. I feel like I'm good with conflict resolution. I feel like my staff members, our PCCs, come to me often with situations that may happen, and how I react to them, it's in a calm manner to where I create that open space for them to feel comfortable. I always give a reason as to like why, and then connect the purpose and kind of show them the bigger picture. And I feel like I'm really good at doing that. I think I probably struggle with maybe setting the communication expectations. Maybe I can do a little bit better at being clear and having showing the accountability. Listening skills I feel like I'm pretty open. I feel like especially I don't react. I kind of give them the room to kind of let loose, and then I kind of just um, speak how I feel. And it's never on a like, oh, you're doing this wrong. It's more of like, how can I help you get better? Like, this is the bigger picture. This is our expectations of what we want, but how can I help you get to that point?
Yeah. And Gabriella, it's interesting when you talk about listening, one of the things that I think about when we talk about why listening is such an important skill, it's because listening invites our curiosity. And, sometimes as leaders and owners, we, dump out a beginner's mindset and think we have to know the answer. And I like to be surprised and be curious. It's interesting. So tying into conflict, I was working with a group and the physician said to me, she said, well, I tried to get to a common goal, and my common goal was for this person to follow the process, but their common goal was this. And I said, well, then you didn't actually get to a common goal. She goes, no, I guess we didn't. And she thought the person's common goal was not to follow not follow what she wanted. And I said, actually, what I heard, so she repeated it. She was able to tell me I wasn't there for this conversation, but the physician said, this person told me she doesn't trust me, that somehow I broke trust with her a couple years ago. And so that's why she's struggling to put this process in place because she doesn't trust me. She told me that. And then I said, well, what I'm hearing is that she has a trust issue. And she goes, do you think? So that's what I mean by listening, is being able to not only hear, she heard and could repeat, she has a trust issue with me, but she didn't listen to the point where she realized that's what we actually need to talk about. Who else?
Well, I have something to share. I think it's kind of on the same lines of what people have already been talking about, and I'm not even sure what term or category to use this as, but I think just creating a culture of kind of unity, trust. We're on the same team. Again, it's in the same flavor, but we recently had a situation where the person who's usually at our front desk scheduling was out, and so someone else was filling in, and she has experience, but not quite as skilled, obviously, and there was a lot going on, and she had double booked someone, and of course we didn't know that until we had two people showing up at the same time, and like, oh, who are you? And it hadn't been put on the schedule correctly, and so anyways, really obviously potentially embarrassing situation. Well, it was embarrassing, but it could have been a lot worse. Thankfully, our clinician was like, you know what, I'm just going to work my lunch, and the person was able. She'd come from out of town. It was a pelvic floor thing, and so she was willing to just kind of hang out, and she just went and ran an errand or two and came back, and then our clinician saw her during lunch. The point is, we weren't sure what had happened until this other secondary front desk person came forward and said, you know what, I think that was me. It was really busy, and I think I had just, forgotten to put her in on the schedule, and I'm really sorry. And we're a small clinic, so thankfully this doesn't happen. In fact, I think this is the only time it's happened in recent memory. But the point of sharing all this is just the fact that Erica was able to literally tattle on herself, knowing that there wouldn't be negative recourse. There would be, a desire to fix whatever needs fixed, but not at her expense. And so I'm not trying to necessarily toot my own horn, just to say that we have a culture here, and I wish I could take more credit, but we're a team. We have each other's back, and it's okay for me to say, you know what, I screwed up, I'm sorry, and us together to solve that. And so I don't even know what you call that. I think it probably involves several things: listening, caring, whatever. But I just hope we can have more of those kinds of situations than the things that I don't know about yet.
Well, and Andrew, it sounds like you're doing a great job of building personal accountability and personal responsibility, where you've built enough safety that someone can say, I made a mistake. And that's an amazing, amazing place for your team to be able to be and for you to be able to be. So I think you should be celebrating that. And I know I would have tons of questions to say, how'd you get there? Like, what were some of the things that you did? Because that's an amazing place to be.
Well, I think the challenge is, how do we scale this?
Mm.
We're still fairly small. I'm probably, within 10 or 15 years of probably just needing to step aside and let these young people take over. But how do you find the right people to come in and help them be a part of a team that really truly has each other's backs? We're working hard together. It's not, a negative competitive situation as we grow.
What have other people done when it comes to adding new team members and really building that into your, walking them into the culture, interviewing for culture fit versus just, the skills? How do the rest of you do that? William, you said you've been grooming someone for 7 years. Tell me more. How do we make sure they're a culture fit?
As you asked that question, I was thinking how hard that question would be to answer. Every clinic has its own flavor, and sometimes I'm thinking physical therapists here, or PTs and OTs, coming out of school, I'm not even sure they know what they want. They think they know what they want as a culture. We do so much continuing ed, and if somebody goes and does a mission trip, they don't take vacation to do it, pushing the customer service thing. So we try to reward and attract people to that culture from the onset, versus trying to get somebody in and bend them to the culture. I've done it for 11 years now, and that has failed horribly, 4 or 5 times. And so the hard part is, like, in the interview process, and I'm sure everybody can relate, trying to figure out who fits, so I can not hire the ones that don't. That's where I tend to hit the most friction. When they get here, if they're in our customer service mindset, and kind of a hustle mindset, it goes great if we select the right people.
Does anybody have questions in particular they use? Because you're right, that selection is vital. Does anybody have questions they specifically use to kind of ferret some of that out?
We just recently created a new template, and I honestly don't have the questions right at hand right this minute. But one thing that I thought might be helpful to share is our interview is set up as a committee and stage progression kind of thing. So the first stage is where we have a specific interview committee where members of the team are actually the ones doing that first interview to make sure that candidates are a correct cultural fit for our clinic. Like if you allow the people to choose who they want to work with, then generally they're going to be happy with who they work with. And then they progress into another interview phase where they go up to the bosses and on to that side of it. We also have a step where they can come in and shadow and observe, so they can make sure that it's not about us. Also, it also has to be a component of them liking us along with us liking them. So make sure they feel like they're going to be a good fit for our environment before we make that offer too.
That's great. I personally love shadow days. I mean, again, going back to my urgent care days, sadly, a lot of little kids vomit in the waiting room. And we had a nurse that was doing her shadow day, and we were walking into the clinic and some kid just throws up all over. And she said, where's the mop? And she went immediately as if to help clean up this vomit. And I'm like, you're hired. It was like, holy Hannah, I'm at it. Another thing that I'm going to share, and I just did this at a conference, we were talking about hiring without the headache, and this is one of my clients. But it was interesting what we really spent time on, because she's discovered that there is an app oh my God, I do sound old today, Stephanie. There's an app called Interview GPT or Interview AI, and it can be on your phone. And so you have it open and it's listening, and you ask, the interviewer asks the question and ChatGPT gives you the answer. Because she just had somebody the other day who actually, she's like, Amy, I was like, they are not answering these questions themselves. Where is this coming from? And that person actually did inadvertently admit that they were using this app to answer questions. So I'm all for the shadow day, because they can't have that app open all day. But here's the other thing, and Andrew, for you, what I want you to do is have your team help clarify what it is that defines that culture. So actually, your example of someone making a mistake and owning up to it is a great introductory question. I think every listserv for practice owners has, behavioral interviewing questions. That's only level 1. Behavioral interview question tells you whether or not they've experienced that situation. It doesn't tell you the really good stuff. So, Andrew, you might say to someone, have you ever had an experience where you've made a mistake and it impacted someone else on the team? Then I want to find out, how did you handle it? How did it make you feel? How did you respond or approach? And you're only going to pick one, but see, what we're doing is we're cascading down. So you've got that introductory behavioral interviewing question, and you've all got a list of those. You can go online. Sadly, there's bazillions of them. But Andrew, if you have your team come up with the key things that make your culture, turn those into your introductory questions. But then, more important than whether or not they've experienced that, I want to know, how did they react and what action did they take because of it? And then my personal favorite thing is to find out, what was the impact or the results of that? And I always love to close with, what would you do differently now because of that experience? Because I want learners on my team. I don't want someone who's memorized a time they made a mistake, and that's all they've done is memorized a time they've made a mistake. I want them to tell me, because of this mistake, I implemented this process, or because of this mistake, I changed this part, or because of this situation, I now do X, whatever it is. I mean, I'll never forget the time I was in the hospital and, a med student was going to do a Romberg on a patient, and they set him up, they told him to close their eyes, and they walked away. Well, for me, when that patient hit the floor, my question was to the medical student, what did you learn in this situation? I don't care that the mistake happened. I mean, granted, that's not good for the patient, so maybe bad example, but you get where I'm going. I wanted to see, did the medical student learn and is now going to do something different because of that? So, Andrew, as you think about how do I get more in the interview, it's by layering this cascading model. Your introductory behavioral question, how they reacted or what action they took, and what's the impact? What do you do differently now because of that experience?
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And how cool if you layer in your team, you get them talking about what makes the culture great. And boy, if you can ask, have you ever made a mistake that's impacted another team member? First of all, if someone answers no, I'd be curious. But then when they do answer, I want to know, how did they handle it? Your person would be able to say, well, I owned up to it, I apologized, and we talked about how to never let it happen again. And here's what we do differently now.
Yeah.
Amy, that was so helpful. For everyone else, I put Amy's contact information and her book in the chat. So if you want to go deeper on all of this work, you can read her book, which I did this month, and I absolutely devoured it. As we're wrapping up, does anyone have any final questions for Amy? Is anyone going to conference and planning to listen to her speak about conflict resolution? Yeah, I'll be there. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, Amy. I really, really appreciated how you made this interactive. I think this is what we've been going for, right? To get everyone talking, everyone sharing from their perspective. So I feel like we finally hit it. Perfect. So,
Awesome. Well, and thank you all. I mean, you all are experts. And so what better way than to help your colleagues and to grow together? So thank you.
and I'm putting our next discussion links in the chat. So just a reminder, we do this every fourth Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, same time every month. And you have to register for each one individually. So May will be operations, and we're actually going to have a panel talking about the different ways to implement RTM. And Nisha will be one of our panelists. So thank you for volunteering there. And then in June will be the same payment panel that we had last year, which I think was our highest attended. So make sure that you mark that one in the calendar. If anyone has a minute to just hang out and give me some quick feedback so that we can continue to optimize these sessions, I would appreciate you staying on. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you same time next month. And I really appreciate that so many people brought their team this time. I think that it's so helpful to have that team approach here on the calls, learning together.